which hardly anyone who didn't live there ever went into, and developed a plan of small city blocks, pure Jane Jacobs, 23 of these blocks connected in every possible way to surrounding streets. This is a further iteration of that plan. The red shows the introduction of commercial, which store-related, street-related retail, which has become much more expensive than what we planned for, but also a diversity of building types that people recognized from surrounding city neighborhoods. The key, I would say, to the real success of Regent Park has been the social development plan, which you see at the bottom. It's not just about creating a physical plan, but all of the community infrastructure, complemented, of course, by a sustainability plan, a tenant relocation plan, and adherence over time to a flexible master plan. So this was an image, an early image, which mixed building types that were familiar to Torontonians. Some high-rise buildings, mid-rise buildings, townhouses, stacked townhouses, a diversity of housing for a complete community, for seniors, for young families, for people who were on rent geared to income, the tenants who were guaranteed the right to return, and in the same numbers that they had been there before, but also introducing a very substantial population of market housing, both condominium and rental, into the mix, along with other uses. Another key to success was a design review panel, which I served on for 13 years, which had representatives from the different design professions, very importantly, residents from Regent Park and the community at large, a sustainability engineer, Toronto Community Housing staff, who reviewed every project, every building, every bit of the public space as it was being designed. And here's an example of one of the interventions of the design review panel, transforming a laneway or perhaps an alley to some of you between two market buildings and two rent geared to income buildings, from being a service space or purely a service space into an active space that would be shared as a public space by all of the occupants of all four of these buildings. And this is currently under construction. This is a model which building by building replaced these plexiglass frames with actual building designs. Different architects were chosen for every building, which got away from the institutional character. And in the end, no one could tell unless they knew which were market buildings and which were public housing rent geared to income buildings. The buildings were all of the same quality, and they were intermingled in a way that made them virtually invisible. The greatest thing that happened were new things that got added to the plan that were never anticipated. The Spectrum for the Arts, an arts and culture building, what is arguably the best indoor swimming pool in the city, the Aquatic Center, university level free courses, a whole variety of cricket pitch, which had not been anticipated, a whole variety of things that added to the richness of the plan as time progressed. This is an image of the Spectrum for the Arts, a 60,000 square foot nonprofit community cultural hub in the middle of the project with 7 innovative, originally cultural organizations. There are more event, performance, and exhibition spaces. Here is the cricket pitch, which turned out to be needed given the composition and people who were coming from different parts of the world where cricket was very popular. We were able to get contributions from Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment to build this in, along with, of course, hockey. And these are some images from Regent Park, pathways to education, having a great grocery store which employed local young people, the variety of different social enterprises which came and occupied the ground floors of the buildings, having a Tim Hortons. For those who are not Canadians, this is kind of a signature coffee shop, which didn't exist in Regent Park, and the great swimming pool that I mentioned, the arts and culture, pedestrian streets. And then finally, I don't know if this is blocked for you as well, but a saying from Jane Jacobs, my great teacher and mentor, are the best plans are the plans that liberate other people's plans. And that's exactly what the Regent Park Master Plan did. How's that? Did I make my 7 minutes?
Excellent. Well done, Ken. It's always a challenge trying to fit everything into such a short period of time. Well done. Thank you for that. And I think that was a great way to kick off our alternative housing innovations. And actually, that's a wonderful quote from Jane Jacobs, actually very inspiring. Thank you, Ken. I would now like to invite Eric Solman, and he is the president of Greenbelt and Road Institute. He's the former Minister of Environment from Norway, and also the former director of UN Environment Executive. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, Toronto. I'm so pleased to be with so many great people planning cities and making cities better. I will speak about green city development, and I will suggest that if you want to look to one city as the star example for green city development in the world, I will suggest Singapore. What's remarkable with Singapore is that Singapore started going green when it was still a poor city. Nearly every city has gone green after it became rich. That's happened all over Europe and most of North America and in many Asian cities also. But Singapore prioritized going green from the very early days, when it was a dirt poor city where people didn't even have enough to eat in Singapore. Still, they put environment at top of the agenda. The founding father of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, said, it's not enshrined in the Human Rights Declaration of the UN that you have the right to take an empty car and go into the city center. If you want to take a car into the city center, you pay a fee. That fee we will use to establish a superb public transport system in Singapore. And by the way, you will fill up your car with your neighbors and friends if you want to go into the city center. In the very early days, in the 1970s, they also removed polluting industries from the Singapore River, cleaned it up and made it a pearl through the city. And what's really remarkable in this is the time it happened. At the same time, in my hometown of Oslo, the city planners were planning for a 6-lane motor road circumventing the royal castle. They wanted to bring down the main street of Oslo. The best prime minister in the history of Norway is not an evil man, but the best prime minister in Norwegian history. He even suggested to turn down the old parliament and replace it with some new modern building, which was fitting the time of car-centered city development. So if you compare this, the wisdom of going green when you're still poor, it's so remarkable. And today, when we look to the world, I mean, we need to get off our Western eyes and to see the enormous development in most of Asia in green development. And I will give you a number of examples. When I meet mayors, and I met numerous mayors from all parts of the world, the main issues are basically the same. Rich city, poor city, big city, a bit smaller city, Latin America, Africa, Europe, Asia, the issues are more or less the same if you want to go green. And I will mention 4 areas. First of all, city planning. If you don't plan a city right, nothing will get right. And it's very inspiring to see, say, Paris now with this 15-minute city ID, that you'll be able to entertain yourself, work, go to school, live in most of your life in just a part of Paris and only go to other parts of Paris for certain purposes. That will reduce transport and make the city a lot more lively, and it's a planning tool which is very, very effective in defining cities. And if you compare North American and European cities tend to be a lot better planned, and those using a lot less resources than similar sized North American cities, which are designed for the automobile and which are spread out at enormous distances and where a public transport system is very difficult. So number 1, city planning. 2, public transport. First time I visited China, there was one metro line in entire China. Line number 1 below the Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Now, Beijing Metro is the biggest metro in the world. Shanghai Metro is the longest metro in the world. And basically every city of any size in China has a vibrant big metro system, making it able to communicate throughout the city by metro. Added, of course, they have very good bus systems, bike sharing, and many other systems. And if we want to point to one fabulous city, the city of Shenzhen, there are now more electric buses in Shenzhen than there is in the entire world outside China combined. Shenzhen alone has 16,000 electric buses, 20,000 electric taxis, a huge number of electric trucks. So the entire city transport system is based on metro and electric mobility of all sorts. And of course, it makes the city very, 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 very clean. And nothing else, this cannot happen other places. Fortunately, Indian cities are now coming at high speed in the same direction, even of course, if they are still struggling a little bit behind China. Third issue is waste management. I recall I spoke to the mayor of Freetown, Sierra Leone, a couple of years back, and she told me I was selected on a 3-issue program for Freetown: waste management, waste management, waste management. Because she said my city is completely overwhelmed with waste. But if you want to see how to handle waste, you don't need to go to the rich parts of the world. You don't need to go to Canada or to Japan. You can go straight to Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, right in the center of Africa, at the heart of Africa. It's the cleanest city in the entire world. You won't find one cigarette package or chocolate paper at the streets of Kigali, because when people see that other people are not throwing waste, they don't do it, and they have a proper waste management system as the basis for this complete change of attitude into cleanliness. And you see this happening also now in India, which of course is also not very rich. City of Indore was just for the 6th time declared the cleanest city in India. That's in a relatively poor state of Madhya Pradesh. Prime Minister Modi of India has just declared a huge number of single-use plastic items illegal in India. You will not be allowed to use them. And of course, that will make the cities much cleaner. And India is now also coming to the top level of recycling. There's a company in India called Attero. They can recycle everything from your computer, from your Apple for iPhone, from your air conditioning equipment, from your refrigerator. Every single mineral can be taken out and recycled into new products, so that we don't waste and make our cities and these horrible waste machines as many cities are at the moment. And lastly, of course, we need to green cities. Indian city of Hyderabad was just declared a global tree city. They have made huge urban parks in Hyderabad. The state of Telangana, where Hyderabad is the capital, has increased the tree cover with 3% just in the last few years, and a lot of that is happening in cities. In the neighboring city of Bengaluru, a small NGO has made 30 small urban parks, making the city much more livable, much more attractive. And of course, the cost of properties is increasing because people simply want to live in such a green city. And again, Shenzhen in China and some of the southern Chinese cities, Hangzhou, Suzhou. Hangzhou has restored the historical West Lake right in the city center. Suzhou has restored all canals, beautiful in city center of Suzhou. And in Shenzhen, they even have wetlands for birds right at the center of this 15 million people city, where birds coming from Australia to Siberia can stay in the city of Shenzhen on the way back and forth between the Arctic and Australia. So Asian cities are gradually now moving very, very fast in the green direction, and there's so much to be learned for the rest of us. But to summarize, these 4 elements, in my view, are core. We need to plan cities better. We need massive public transport system to not be overwhelmed by cars. We need better waste management systems. and we need to green cities to bring nature back in cities. And what we saw during COVID was, of course, that in many cities all over the world, wildlife came back. There were penguins walking down the streets of Cape Town, South Africa, for example. There were deers in Japanese cities. Then we just stopped behaving so badly to the environment. So thank you so much. I understand this session is mainly about housing, but housing and green development of city cannot be separated. And if you want an overall inspiring city, I suggest again Singapore as the one most inspiring city in the world, because they decided that they could go green when they were poor, not just after they became rich. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. A lot of good examples there in a very short period of time. And I can vouch for Kigali. I was there earlier this year and it was spotless for a city and the number of people who live there.
You are speechless if you walk the streets of Kigali. It's so clean. It's unbelievable.
It is wonderful. Okay, I thank you for that, Eric. I would now like to invite Mark Palmer, and Mark is the president and CEO of Greenland International Consulting. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Eleanor. I'm just going to bring up a deck here. Are we good?
Yes, I can see it.
Great. Okay. So just a bit about my background. I'm a professional engineer, and I'm the owner of Greenland, the Greenland Group. It's interesting, when I was asked to speak at this conference, the favorite album came to mind from years ago from Supertramp called Crisis What Crisis. And I guess the reason I brought that up was there's many headlines in the paper now in Ontario and Canada about this crisis. And, you know, the Supertramp album is really a reflection. It's somewhat prophetic about surrounded by chaos, and even the climate backdrop is alarming as well. So I'm here today to talk about a bit of a journey. I'm speaking to you from the shores of Collingwood, Ontario, which is on the South Georgian Bay ecosystem, north of Toronto. And we have our base of operations there. But over the last few years, my journey is taking me into being a land developer. And because of the practice that we have at Greenland, being innovative with green technologies and land development, it's really an interesting journey of mine that is with other partners. I'm getting more involved with social impact project, and one is alternative housing. So I'm going to talk about 5 projects that I'm involved with, but the slide in front of you is really things that we do as a day-to-day operation with land developers. These are required by municipalities in some circumstances, but also the land development industry is very aware of these issues. And today is just to reinforce the importance of the land development sector being involved with alternative housing innovation. So a number of the projects that we're working, either tiny projects or large projects, we're looking at the proper use of building materials for thermal massing, solar energy opportunities. Rainwater harvesting is quite an interesting topic now in Canada with our abundance of water, but there are stresses on infrastructure systems, rain gardens, water balance needs to maintain pre-development conditions, and then also urban farming and smart technologies. Urban farming has been around a while, but we are integrating that into these smaller projects. The first project, this is our main office in Collingwood. So the second project will explain why I'm doing this. In the back, we call it the bunker. We're in the process of renovating that into a unit that could hold up to 3 apartments. And right now it's just slated for 1 employee to live there, but it could be adapted for 3. And it's an infill project in the town of Collingwood. So it's been an interesting journey because I've had to deal with the municipality, who is really trying its best to come up to speed with zoning and planning and fees and red tape related matters. And if you're in the land development business, you totally understand where I'm coming from. But it's been an interesting journey. We've been interviewed by the town for proactive ideas. But also what's important to understand, you need champions. And my wife, Jane, on the left, she's really the green in Greenland, with one of our elected members running for mayor, Yvonne Hamlin, and she's running for mayor and has a strong background in affordable housing. So she took an interest to our project and volunteered her time with expertise with her municipal engineering planning background, which really did save us time and money going through the process. So we need elected officials to really be aware of the issues and also have expertise. So why we're doing that project? Well, this is our new office right across the road. There's a website there if you'd like to check it out. But what's happening now as we get into the design aspect of this with the building permit, we're now looking at repurposing some of the floors to include co-working space and co-living space. It was designed as a 30 condo project with our bottom commercial floor, but we're now revisiting the whole space use of this, that maybe there is an opportunity for co-living and also a co-working space with another company. So again, with these projects that I'm involved with, this is integrating a number of the SD sustainable development green aspects of what we do on the larger projects, but there's lots of opportunities for the smaller ones. So again, this is just getting, we're just getting into the design phase right now. We have our approvals from the planning side, and so heads up, maybe it'll be something to talk about in the next year's conference. The third journey I'm on is with a land developer, Tom Vincent, who is in Collingwood, has taken a shining to tiny homes and modular home technology. So this is another solution for the infill residential solution to housing in my neck of the woods, and I think it applies to a lot of other areas in Canada. So we've developed with our engineering expertise, we've taken a 1 acre parcel of land, this can be twisted and adapted otherwise to other sites, and trying to find the best servicing solution with these tiny homes. But again, it does come down to a return on investment for the developer, who is really looking for innovation, but also flexibility with the municipal approvals. And my last slide, I'll talk about that a bit more. The fourth project I'm doing with Tom is actually repurposing a track and field, publicly owned. And that's another thing that's important for alternative housing, is public lands and how that could be made available to the land development industry through some process, whether through an RFP procurement, but there should be this energy and enthusiasm to work with the land development industry so we can propose this type of innovation for projects. The last project is a major one happening in Collingwood with a couple clients of mine, involving regional government as well as the province. It's a health and wellness village. And what's really exciting about this is a large project. It's a village within a village, essentially. The picture on the left is the village vision, and then the town of Collingwood to the north, and you'll see Georgian Bay in the backdrop. But what's exciting for this project, it is a multi-year project, of course, but there's such wonderful opportunity for this transformational project to really change the economy here and also provide workforce housing. But on the right, you'll see a number of technologies that we'll be integrating, especially rainwater harvesting. I call it rainwater harvesting on steroids, that we'll be doing this to achieve many opportunities through the site development process. And the last slide for this project, the developers have done these types of projects for workforce housing, so we're pretty excited to get involved on this from a larger scale. So my last slide, I'll just touch on a few things. You know, really the land development industry is somewhat, I think, the elephant in the room. Municipalities should be more engaged with listening to the land development sector, and especially business owners like myself, because we need employees to work in our jurisdictions, and we have great ideas. And there's a number of ways to really incentivize and attract this type of partnership is through, you know, for example, waiving some of the fees and in optimizing the planning process. And this is something that we're hearing a lot in Ontario, and the municipal elections coming up on October 24th are going to be critical, I think, to attract politicians and elect politicians that really have that interest as well. The last thing is just, we all have to recognize we have a housing crisis. There's no doubt about it. We've got to get on with it. But I really believe the enigma that we're facing can only be solved with business owners, employers, and the land development sector. And that was the purpose of my talk, was just to reinforce that important partner to find sustainable solutions. Okay, so that is it.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay,
I appreciate the
you're
presentation. Lots of different green energy and new ideas, and it's some ideas we've heard about, but you're actually being able to get them off the ground, which is really great and nice to see. Thank you so much for your presentation. Our next speaker is Mayor Sandra Masters, and Mayor Masters is the Mayor of Regina. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon. Thanks for having me here today. I'm joining you from Treaty 4 territory in southern Saskatchewan, parts of Alberta and Manitoba. The original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and homeland of the Métis Nation. And it kind of, my land acknowledgement sort of bleeds a little bit. I'm going to focus a little bit more on the inclusive portion of housing. The reality is, in the city of Regina, if you're not familiar, we have about 240,000 people that live in our city. We're ranked one of the most affordable metropolitan cities in Canada. Average home price, believe it or not, of $266,000. And to Eric Solheim, we are also a global tree city. So we have hand planted on the prairies our tree canopy here that has got us United Nations recognition. You know, compared to other cities in Canada, at present, we don't have a housing shortage. However, we've got a more distinct problem, which I'm going to tell Ken Greenberg that I'm very inspired by Regent Park in Toronto. So last year, coming out of the pandemic, just as everyone else was experiencing, it exacerbated with limits on shelter space and overflowing of into our park space of a tent city, essentially. So we developed an emergency shelter, which has transformed into the creation of our first fully supportive housing units. And so what came out of it was an intention to partner with Indigenous-led organizations. In our community, 10% of our population is of Indigenous descent. In our province, it's one of the fastest growing demographics. The issue for our city is that around our core neighborhood, and so when we think about, you know, for example, green cities and increasing density and going up, the two areas, neighborhoods surrounding our city center are frankly have the most fire and police calls in our city. And for a long time, there has been what I would characterize as neglect of these communities and focusing in on revitalization. So we have passed incentives, we have created these partnerships, but really partnering with Indigenous organization, which serves the community, serves all nations within our community, to develop 24 supportive housing in partnership with the provincial government. And what's probably unique, I think, for the city of Regina is, for so long, other than incentives and housing incentive programs for affordable housing construction, and we've had success with that program out in our outlying areas, the city of Regina has not really played an integral role about coming to the table to participate. And so what we learned in this past year has been that when we show up and we bridge, we use our relationships with our community-based organizations and to go to the province or the federal government, it's been instrumental in actually providing some success. We've also had clearly some reaching home, but again, our Reaching Home initiative, the city led that project to award it again to an Indigenous-led organization. Of our homeless count, 80% are of Indigenous descent. And so it would seem to me that in the spirit of treaty, which acknowledges that there are different ways of being and knowing, that the solutions are embedded within Indigenous culture. So springboarding from that, we have an opportunity before us, which seems to me to be, as opposed to just challenges, a bit of a confluence of opportunity. At the same time, we're looking to develop in our core, investing in the replacement of civic infrastructure from an aquatic center to a cricket pitch and a ball pitch and synthetic soccer fields, that green space in the center, which borders one of our, frankly, most affordable communities. You know, I think the average house price within North Central, for example, which borders our city center core, is between $70,000 and $100,000. However, we've lost 1,000 residents in the last 10 years within that community as they move out. And so really having a significant focus on two core neighborhoods that are attached to our downtown with the idea of how to revitalize them. So the investment in the civic infrastructure is sort of step one. We are looking at partnering with First Nations economic development corporations, as well as Métis economic development corporations, to utilize not just public lands on a potential land swap, but including them in that urban design planning process that could look at the revitalization of a neighborhood where the concentration of Indigenous renters or homeowners is higher on average in a particular neighborhood. The other thing, speaking to some of the other speakers I've heard today, is that we lack data. Aside from Stats Canada, we lack a significant amount of data about who's doing what, who's providing what, and what do folks need. And it's enormously problematic because we talk in anecdotes, and that doesn't it doesn't serve decision making very well. To the point I think Mark Palmer was just making, we have a new leader of our economic or our planning and development branch within our city, who is really focused on revitalization. And we have actually targeted around that core area and those core neighborhoods to understand that folks wanting to invest in their properties or in taking on buildings, we're looking at how can we incent that in a very targeted approach. We continue to look at our housing stock and understanding, where those gaps are, but again, that data becoming a critical part of it. The other piece in our city center core that's just been approved, and again, in partnership with the federal and provincial governments, is a YWCA Center for Women and Families. We do have, Saskatchewan has the highest rates of domestic and intimate partner violence in Canada. In fact, twice as much as the national average. And this model the YWCA has put forward is a hub model of support, where various community-based organizations will be consolidated into one to provide wraparound services to women and children who are fleeing domestic violence. It also includes Saskatchewan's first year-round healing lodge to be connected to the cultural practices, ceremony healers, and elders within our Indigenous community. The point, I think, that what I've learned in terms of the intersectionality or the lack of understanding of the intersectionality, perhaps from the civic organization, I think the community gets this, and it's just a matter of being awake to this now, where it's everything from litter to transit to park space to schools, zoning and development. Police and fire and those community services and those community programs that we provide, that all of them are based in relationship. And I think that everyone's touching upon, those stakeholder relations and how everybody has a role to play. But even more basic than that is the relationship between people and having to be party to it. And I think often what has happened historically here is that folks in the community are good with each other, but the city has remained somewhat removed from it. That notion of really redefining public service and the role of the bridge building that the city can play between community-based organizations, between community associations, between levels of government, and even interdepartmental within our own city, has been highlighted in the last year for sure, that there is a intentional investment in new partnerships, but new community relationships as well, which have warranted us not just in the past year, doubling our affordable housing stock and creating from 0 to 54 supportive housing units that I think we get to continue to build upon. And going forward, I think that the overall investment in is the focus shifting to that permanent supportive housing model, which right now would be Indigenous led. That is the original relationship we have to get right with. But that also then feeds into our largest city's growing demographics.
Sorry, Mayor, I just have to ask you to finish up.
Yep,
Sorry.
New Canadians. Yeah, no, it's good. You know what? I will just wrap it up there so you can move on.
Well, thank you so much for that. And it feels very un-Canadian interjecting and stopping people from speaking. It goes against every natural thing we've got here. Thank you so much for bringing in your experience with including Indigenous peoples in planning, in building shelter, in coming to solutions in Regina. I think it's a very valuable contribution to today's discussion. Thank you, Mayor. Our next speaker is Crystal Valencia from Home Sweet Hope. Welcome, Crystal.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm just going to share my screen. Can everyone see that without the shared, without my talking notes?
Yes, yep, we can see it.
Great. So, one of the largest challenges that Canadians are facing today is the rising cost of housing, as everyone knows, and a lack of affordable options. And according to CMHC, at current building paces, there will be about 19 million housing units in Canada by the year 2030. However, for housing to be affordable, the total number of units would need to be over 22 million units by 2030. And this 3 million unit gap is one of the leading causes for a lack of affordable housing supply, especially in Ontario and BC. So in 2016, the UN Committee of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights published a report criticizing Canada for a persistent housing crisis, and that we face, as we face in the country, new purpose-built housing is being outpaced by the demand for affordable rental units. And the problem that we're recognizing is that there's a lack of knowledge and capacity to act on the silent housing crisis of single-parent-led households. Single-parent households are often a forgotten about demographic when we talk about housing. And I work for an organization called Home Sweet Hope, similar to what the YWCA does in Regina, actually. We support Halton-based single-parent families on their journeys from poverty to self-sufficiency through an education-focused flagship program, Homeward Bound Halton. We offer wraparound services to break barriers of poverty by helping families who are transitioning out of homelessness and precarious housing with rental subsidies, connections to community resources like mental health, healthy food, and childcare, and basic life skills like budgeting. Once single parents are connected to the required resources, they have the opportunity to pursue a full-time scholarship, resume building, professional development, and job internships. Pre-COVID, Homeward Bound had been 100% successful in breaking a mother's dependency on social assistance programs. Post-COVID, as a result of, in large part, of the rising prices of housing, parents can no longer graduate independently and afford rental without external subsidies. On average, the prices for one-bedroom apartments are around $2,200, and if an individual or dependent or individual has children or dependents where the second bedroom is needed, the average cost is around $2,800. Based on this definition of affordable housing, a person would need to make $88,000 for in order to afford a one-bedroom, or $113,000 to afford a two-bedroom. For many professions, the salary is not attainable. And I'd like to just keep your attention to the fact in the middle there. It would take 294 months, that's over 24 years, for an individual who would be saving at a rate of 10%. And that means that, a person with an entry-level salary needs to take 24 years in order for them to actually afford any down payment for a one-bedroom. That's only a one-bedroom condo. This is a housing issue rooted by unaffordability of the housing crisis paired with low wages. And those that suffer most in silence are the single-parent households. Just for sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of the identified pain points, but something that I want to flag to everyone is that the housing challenges is, on the second point here, is the proximity to wraparound support. That is an identified pain point by the parents that we've asked. Housing challenges are interconnected with lack of basic life skills, mental health, food insecurity issues. Therefore, close proximity to wraparound support is required to allow for parents to focus on the root of causes of homelessness and poverty. So we asked some single parents about housing, and here's what they said. 100% of them were single mother-led families. We experienced a hard reality check when we asked our first few single mother-run activities and workshops. We needed to know, this is why we need to continue doing the work that we're completing. Here are some of the results as listed. Some key outcomes is that 91% of our identified as marginalized voices, so by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, Traditionally, we would think that childcare is most important for single parent families, but we proved to be one of the least important factors in housing. The top 3 factors were price, proximity to elementary schools, and on-site laundry, just to name a few. Our solution to this would be that we are proposing an affordable housing for single parent-led families, by single parents, for single parents. And it's inspired by the City of Vienna's gender-sensitive housing built in 1995, where we seek to understand the everyday needs and patterns of single parents and incorporate them into every level of home design to make housework, care work, and maintenance easier. We need to increase the housing stock of this affordable, increase the stock of affordable housing in the region to both to secure housing for our homeless participants and to ensure self-sufficiency for our parents. Some lessons learned is that it is difficult to be a single mother and a housing advocate. Therefore, we have found that it is only worthwhile if families are paid for the time that they are meaningfully contributing to this housing prototype. That means in gift cards, in one-time honorariums, etc. But we cannot expect these families to go out of their way from their day-to-day jobs when they're making an income to come out and help us. Secondly, work with people who truly understand what you're trying to achieve. And collaborators are always great and necessary, but you should only formally partner with like-minded people who understand our goals, and they have the knowledge, power, and influence to act upon it. Here are some examples of just to emphasize that last point. So we have been able to work with some really incredible organizations, and this support can be made through direct funding for companies who provide services that would otherwise cost a nonprofit organization thousands of dollars. One example of this is a partnership with Chandos Construction. Chandos provided a Class D survey report, a unit cost analysis for Home Sweet Hope, to get a cost per square meter on our affordable housing. They also offer socially procured building materials with minimal profits. That is pretty incredible to find in any construction company. So we were very thankful to have Chandos as a part of that, as a partner. We have the Halton region, who is our municipal ally, and they have helped us break through some government red tape, get access to surplus land availabilities to submit public RFPs, connections to support from like-minded companies within the region, and other organizations like HMC, which is also a nonprofit organization, the Halton Multicultural Council. And their goal is to keep communal housing run by social organizations and encourage transferring resources within the nonprofit to organizations within the nonprofit sector if we're trying to acquire more land. And so we envision here to create a circular economy with all of our partners in private, public, and nonprofit, to create a circular economy within HSH participants and graduates, meaning the families who graduate from Homeward Bound will be the paid property managers, landscapers, tradespeople within the housing complex. And I recognize that I'm over time, I'm almost done. One of the primary goals in creating this cooperative housing is to create a circular economy and to empower each other with each improvement. Our ideal scenario is that women who receive help will then first enter the program and pay it forward by helping those who enter the program later. One way of creating this situation is to create an online forum for participants within the program where they can chat with each other. And the forum doesn't need to be specific to the parents in our programs. It can be through shelters, other women who are experiencing homelessness. They can be other single parents in similar situations across the city. And that way we can learn from one another and have this kind of open dialogue and understand the trends across cities. And while many of our women will be living together, having an online forum will offer people an opportunity to ask questions and receive answers and remain that connective kind of ecosystem. Secondly, we recognize that it's difficult to transfer one
you, Crystal,
unit.
I have to interject. I'm so sorry.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay. Thank you so much. That's okay.
Ozan, I know you're on here as well. Is there the opportunity for people to share their presentations after the fact or just the recording?
Absolutely. We have the overall Drive link. I can share in the chat with you. You can download them from there as well.
Okay, that would be wonderful. I just feel terrible cutting off Crystal. So
That's okay.
And you're welcome to upload your presentations there.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Crystal. There's so many, so much good data that you actually have in that presentation. It would be a great thing to have a copy of it too, for sure. Okay, so thank you for that, Crystal. Our next speaker is having some challenges connecting, so we're going to move him to the end, which means our next speaker is going to be Dr. Alias bin Ramali, Director General at the Federal Department of Town and Country Planning, Plan Malaysia, of Ministry of Housing and Local Government in Malaysia. Welcome, Doctor. We just have, you're still on mute, sir.
You listen to me, Eleanor?
Perfect, we can hear you now.
Okay, good morning, Eleanor. Good morning from city of Baku, Azerbaijan. And today I will speak on the topic of housing the nation, government's agenda for inclusive communityism. So just a scenario for housing in Malaysia context. So we starting with the independence, post-independence since 1957, and we proceed to the we proceed to the 1986 with the market-driven housing. So the private housing start in 1986, and after that we focus by 1998 we focus on housing for zero squatters in the context of cities in Malaysia, and from 2012 until now our focus on affordable housing and also on low-cost housing. So we also face this with the situation at the market-led development or planning-led development. That's the attitude of developers. Sometimes when they have a problem, they need the government to intervene in the context of housing development in Indonesia. But if they in the context of success, they ask the government not to disturb their activities. Okay, so very brief on the demographic patterns. So in Malaysia, we try to categorize the context of household group into the bottom 40, B40, and after that medium 40, M40, and T20. So this is the context of the household income. For instance, 16% of the Malaysian household in the category of the bottom 40, and we have 37.2% in the group of M40, medium 40, and T20. Okay, there are several issues and challenges in the context of housing development in Malaysia, and it's become the priority of Malaysia government to find solution to the development of housing, especially for affordable and also for low-cost housing. Number one is on the affordability. So we have a special study on how to measure, to evaluate the median multiple income, comparing the house price index for the whole Malaysia. We have 13 states and more than 155 PBTs. We try to relate or make an evaluation based on the income and also with the house price. Okay. Our challenge is we don't want to develop affordable housing. That's our principle. And number two, how to reduce the residential properties overhang, and it's happened in the context for the low-cost housing, because based on our record, more than 5% of households that already completed is still in the context of overhang. So it's quite difficult to get by sometimes in certain market segments. And number third is challenge to make it equilibrium in the context of demand and supply of housing, including public housing and also affordable housing. So it's our duty, although there are many parties involved with the development of housing at the federal level, state level, and also by local level, and including housing by the private developers. So we believe that the government intervention is the success factor in the context of housing development, especially for affordable housing. And it's very good, very fortunate, because we currently, Malaysian government conduct a special home ownership program that involve 4 components. Number 1, in terms of the housing providers. Number 2, on financing, 3rd, on program, and also intervention in terms of the policy. So number 1, so housing provider will involve the federal, state, and also private developers. We work together to develop public housing, affordable housing for Malaysia. And the second one, we have a huge of the initiative by federal government, by the government, also by the bank, commercial bank, to help the household, how to help them in to make sure that they can buy house. So there are many programs. For instance, we have a program for housing credit guarantee scheme. If you working by your own, you don't have a salary slip, the government will have. And also we also have a program of My First Home scheme. And the 3rd one, we also rent to own. Now you rent and that you can own your housing. And number 3 on the housing program and promotion, we have a Malaysia Family Housing Carnival every month for the whole cities. Before this, the people come to government. Now the government come to people to help them in terms of the help them in terms of the housing ownership. We also have a program youth transit home for the youth generation. And we also have the other program called the My House program. And in terms of the government intervention, in our 5 years Malaysia plan, we give focus on housing, affordable housing. We also a special national housing policy, and we also have a special national affordable housing policy. And the 3rd one, the planning, physical planning also help in the context of the housing development, housing planning. And the second last slide, specifically on the affordable housing development in Malaysia. For instance, okay, we have public housing program. Selling is 42,000 ringgit, equivalent to $9,240. Very cheap, 750 square feet. We also have a youth transit house, only monthly rental $55. We have the special housing for government servant with the price less than 66,400, 1,500 square feet. We also have, if you have land with certain household income, the government will spend for you 6,600 ringgit to pay for you. And there are also other programs, let's say program Prima, one Malaysia affordable housing that the price below $55,000 with a square foot of 1,500 square feet. So the government, one of the program, the government will support you up to give the finance 110% to help the household. And for rental housing, for low-cost housing, monthly is 124 ringgit, equivalent to only $27.28 per month, including the maintenance fee. Very cheap, very cheap. So that's the initiative by the Malaysian government. And the last slide is current initiative by my department, Plan Malaysia, that also a very important department in the context of housing development in Malaysia. We now try to develop Malaysia Urban Observatory, and we currently try to develop dashboard for National Affordable Housing Index, price index. This is very crucial. We're talking about the housing. We cannot put the overall of Malaysia using the same price index for public housing, affordable housing. The situation in cities, different price, different demand, different supply. So that's why we need to make sure that the supply of public housing must meet the real demand, the effective demand in housing, especially affordable and also low-cost housing. Some residents, they need the strata development. Some need landed housing. Some need certain facilities in the context of housing development. So that's our current initiative and the way forward for Malaysian housing. Okay, number 1, we need to strengthen government intervention. We will continue to intervene in the context of housing development, especially for public housing, to ensure that the achievement of the agenda of livable Malaysia. And also, number 2, try to reduce the cost barrier to affordable housing, try to help in whatever angle from Malaysian government, upon the federal government and also the state government. The third one, to strengthen the coordination and partnership between the many players in housing, including private sectors. Okay, and number fourth, decision making and housing provision, and I said before that, must be based on the big data analytics and housing database based on the Malaysia Urban Observatory. That's all about the initiative by the government of Malaysia to ensure that the agenda of housing nation will be achieved, and also the agenda of livable Malaysia is where one of the focus in the livable Malaysia is to ensure that everyone, our goal is to make sure that one family, one house. That's all, Eleanor. Thank you very much from Baku, Azerbaijan. Thank you.
Thank you. An excellent presentation. And it sounds like you have something that many of us don't, which is the data that's needed and a lot of the calculations that need to happen. It's very impressive what you've been able to do. So I think our last speaker, unfortunately, the mayor from Chisinau municipality has been unable to connect. Our time is up for our session today, but if someone wanted to ask a quick question, I think we could let it happen. And other than that, I do want to highlight that Ozan has put the Google Drive and the link for the Google Drive in the chat. So if you want a copy of presentations, just make your way there, click on the Google Drive, and it's all in there. So I'll just ask very quickly, does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask today? Okay, so I'm not seeing any. I want to thank all the speakers for coming today. Very interesting and very different presentations in different perspectives. Definitely a global perspective as well. I have a ton to think about as I walk away from this today. I hope many of you do as well. And I hope you can take a moment just to download some of those presentations, because there appears to be a lot of great information for all of us there. So thanks so much for joining day one of the Urban Economy Forum. Thanks so much for attending this session.